There appear to be at least 3 levels of reactions to the notion of UFOs, or life outside of our world that may have actually encountered our world. There are those who would say, oh, heck yeah, absolutely. I can't get enough of it. I totally buy into it. Those who completely deny it and say, hogwash. And then there are those who I think are like the category that most of us fall into, that goes something like this. I don't know, but I'm not willing to say that it absolutely cannot happen. It appears that even in the U.S. government, this category exists because the Pentagon, did you know, has long had a UFO program that used to be extremely secretive. Key word, used to be. News with Rick Sanchez. Special correspondent Michelle Greenstein is joining us now because the head of that program is now going to go public and tell his story. Who is this guy and what are we talking about?
He is. His name is Louise Elizondo, and the program was the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The Pentagon put $22 million a year into this thing, which was then a secret. This was their secret UFO program, right? And it was supposedly concluded in the year 2012. Now, before this program, the U.S. Air Force actually had something different. It was called Project Blue Book, and that investigated claims of UFOs, thousands of them, in the 50s and 60s. But once the Navy upgraded its radar technology in the 80s, we started to see these UFO sightings become much more common. Now, Louise Elizondo, who's the former director of this program, actually resigned in protest. He claims that he wasn't a fan of the excessive secrecy, and he wasn't a fan of the fact that the government was unwilling to address the potential risks of UFOs.
Well, let me ask you the question that I think most people who are listening to you speak would want to know. The fact that they had a program, okay. The fact that there are supposed sightings, okay. What's the difference, though, between some drunk guy in Arkansas saying, I saw something that doesn't check out, and verifiable accounts that they think, hey, there may have actually been an unidentified flying object there?
Right. So those drunk guys, which maybe there were thousands of them, you know, in the past few decades, a lot of people are claiming to have seen UFOs in the U.S., I guess are now being maybe vindicated by these Pentagon officials like Mr. Elizondo, who, like I said, was the head of a Pentagon program. And he said that what these people were seeing in the Navy and the Air Force was being verified on radar, and that these UFOs were so fast, because, you know, UFO just means anything that you can't identify, right?
Right, exactly.
But the reason he thinks they were, you know, let's say out of this world is because they were so fast that they would have experienced the gravitational forces that far exceed the limits of endurance for both humans and the aircraft known to humans. He says that by all of his observations, they had to have been from another world.
But half the time, these things are either the Russians or the Americans doing some missile deployment or missile test that maybe Mr. Elizondo didn't know about.
You know, I really don't know. I don't have firsthand knowledge of it, but let's take a look at what he had to say. This is his justification. He says that they don't have engines or even wings, and they are seemingly able to defy the natural effects of Earth's gravitational pull. So he thinks, this man thinks, that if this were a court of law, that we are well beyond the point of what you would call reasonable doubt. And he's going to be sharing these stories in depth on the History Channel tonight. That's when the docuseries premieres.
And he's speaking in protest, which is what makes this story so interesting.
Right. He and his fellow colleagues say that they weren't able to get this on the desk or on the agenda of the actual Secretary of Defense, so they're actually going to the public instead. And he's not alone. Christopher Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense who worked under both the Clinton and Bush administrations, says that although there hasn't been any contact between the military and between, you know, whatever beings are on these alleged UFOs, all indications point to the fact that these UFOs are what he calls, quote, intelligently controlled devices. So to him, it's no longer a question of if UFOs exist, but the question is, what are they? Who's in them, and why are they out here?
Good stuff.
And you know what else is kind of interesting that I do want to bring up?
I did not know.
Mellon is framing this as a national security issue. And he and others are saying, oh, these UFOs, they're operating near U.S. military facilities. And it's interesting, we might as well bring this out into the open. He actually drafted the legislation that actually created the U.S. Special Operations Command. So he's in the military intelligence circles, and these people are definitely framing it as a national security issue. And some may even say that these former government officials are capitalizing on, you know, our inherent nature of being curious, of wanting to know whether UFOs exist, on the long history of people claiming to see UFOs, to justify the creation of this new military branch, the Space Force, that Trump is already, setting into motion. In fact, we covered this a couple of days ago. If the Senate Armed Services Committee version of the defense spending bill passes both the House and the Senate, we are going to see the creation of the U.S. Space Force under Donald Trump.